this is more of a system building type of question here with a couple of simple key rules here that will build. Also, this was from Miguel, I believe. Yeah, Miguel, I think. So it's fairly simple. Rule number one, essentially, the bar must, close above the 20 EMA. Yeah, so we're just looking for the closing price of the bar to be above the 20 EMA, and that's a long trend filter, or below the 20 EMA, obviously, and that would be a short signal filter. And then the next one here is very specific. So we're looking, all right, so for a long trade here, right, it needs to be an up bar where the close is at the top, or the close is no more than one tick from the high, right? One tick from the high. So in other words, a one tick wick, right? So the bar basically has to close, at or nearly at, the top of the bar there. So once that happens, right? So that's the trade setup. I'd call that the trade setup. There is looking for this bar right here with only a one tick wick, or maybe the bar closes all the way at the top or all the way at the bottom. Yeah, there we go. So there's a bar that closes all the way at the bottom, right there, that red bar, right? And then so the signal, the trade signal to buy is generated. So basically, the next bar, well, basically price must move up one tick beyond the high of the previous bar, right? So the setup bar, let's see if we can zoom in here. Yeah, I mean, these lines don't agree with the description. So it says that price must move one tick above where that line is, right? So we can see that line is at the high of the setup bar. And so as soon as price moves one tick past the high of that setup bar, then enter a trade, right? So obviously, jump into a trade immediately, and then obviously, if price, doesn't move one tick higher, then obviously, there's no trade signal. So, right. So like for example, this red down bar here, right? We can see that the next bar, price never moved, two ticks, price never moved one tick lower. So there never would have been a trade signal on this green bar when the green bar opened. So, all right, so that is it in a nutshell. And let's see. I already have the 5-minute chart up. Great. So let me just put the EMA in my chart, and we'll be ready to go. All right. So next, I'm going to get BloodHound open. Right. So I already have. You can see I already have BloodHound on the chart down here. So we'll get that open. And then the very next thing you want to do is when you're, starting to build, a new system here, is you should give your system a name here. So we're going to go to the main tab, right, and use the save as or the save button, right, so that way we can put in a file name. So right, I'm just going to put in today's workshop date, right, just put in today's date. There we go. That's the file name that I use for these workshops, and there we go. So we have a file name set up, so now all of our work gets saved to that file. And let's see here. All right, so the first logic template here, let's see, what should we call this? All right, I guess something like that. So, right, essentially we're looking for a close at the bar top, for a signal. Normally, since there's a lot of new people in the room today, let me just explain here, because I don't want to teach any bad habits. right? So you can see that really I kind of came up with a system name for the logic template. So for you, when you're building your own trade ideas, really this name here should be the file name, right? So obviously I'm in a different situation where I'm going to get asked a lot of questions today, and I need to put, all those questions into one BloodHound file, right? So that way if you want to download today's workshop BloodHound file, right, you have all those questions contained within one file. But normally you want one file per trading idea, right, per trading system. So really this name here that I used should be the file name, right, for this particular trading idea. And then as far as the logic template's name here, you would just use something simple like entry signal, something like that, right? Be more direct as to what is contained within this logic template. And so, this is the trade signal entry rules, right? So this is an entry signal that we're building, as opposed to, right? Because sometimes, there we go. Sometimes on the logic tab, we could add another new logic template here, and maybe some trading ideas might have exit signals, to tell you to get out of a trade, right? So if you have an exit signal, right, you would add a new logic template, and then you would name that, exit signal, something like that, right? So that is essentially kind of like the good habits. So when you're building systems. So let me delete that there. All right. So again, the file name should be the core name of the trading idea, right? Your trading system. And then the logic templates are kind of like, think of those, I guess, as like chapters within a book, right? So the file name would be the name of the book or the name of your trading system, and the logic templates would be kind of like the chapters within a book, such as your entry signal, your exit signals, and maybe you have modified versions of your entry signals. And so that's essentially is what these logic templates are for. So you can build modified versions of the same entry signal, but just with slight alterations. So you can test, different scenarios there. Like for example, we're going to build an entry that uses a 20 EMA. So maybe on some markets you discover that maybe a 30 EMA is a little better on other instruments. So you would have one entry signal for the 20 EMA, and you would have a different logic template, that uses the 30 EMA instead. So you would have two logic templates. Both are entry signals, but one uses the 20 EMA and the other entry signal uses the 30 EMA, right? And that way on the chart, you could flip between those two different entry signals, very quickly and easily. So, all right. Okay, anyway, so getting back on track here. So, all right, so we need to compare the close of the bar to the 20 EMA. So, all right, so to do that, we're going to use the comparison solver. All right. So before I get ahead of myself, we need to make an adjustment here. So I'm going to close this out. So if you notice, right, this says that the trade is taken immediately. So obviously, if let's see if I have any examples here. Yeah, right there. Actually, look at that. We actually have a trade set up right here and now, right there, right? This bar closed at the top, and so the trade signal would occur in real time. Let's see, where are we? 50, yeah, there we go, right? So as soon as this forming bar, hit that line, right, which is one tick above the high of our our setup bar here, right? We want a signal instantly, right? So that means I have to change the calculate mode for BloodHound, right? If you want your indicators to operate on the bar that's building, right, you have to change the calculate mode for that indicator. So, so actually, let's do this. Yeah, let's open up the EMA, and let's change the calculate mode for the EMA to on price change. And then also we're going to change BloodHound. Also change the calculate to on price change as well, right? So that's how you get your indicators to operate on the bar that's building there. All right. So another important thing to note is, right, when you change that calculate setting, bar number 1 is the bar that's building. So the closed bar is actually, bar number 2, or one bar back, right? So that's important to understand that distinction there when you're building a system here, that generates signals in real time, right? So back to the comparison solver, right? So we want to look at the bar that had closed and compare that closing price to the EMA, right? So for this comparison, actually, let's give this a name here. There. All right, so you notice I used, the number 2 here, closed 2, and then EMA, I put a number 1 in there. So I'll explain that in a moment here, right? So again, we're comparing the close of the closed bar to the EMA. And let's just put that back there. There. Right. So input A is going to be the bar prices. So we're going to change the type to price. Right? So the input type is price, and now we have access to all of the bar prices here. And so we want the close, right? Now the look back period 1 is going to be the current bar. So remember, the current bar is building, and so we're not looking at that closing price. We're looking at the bar that had just closed. So we need to go back. So our look back needs to be set to 2, incremented up 1. So that's why I put a number 2 here. So that tells us that we're not looking at the closing price of the current bar. We're looking at the closing price of 1 bar back. So, all right, and then input B, that's going to be our EMA 20. So let's open up the indicator list here. There we go, and let's put in EMA for our little search term up here, search box, and let's see here. There we go. Boy, there's a lot of indicators that use the EMA. So there's the base EMA, and we want a 20 period, and we're good to go. So now you notice I put in the little box. So this is actually a programming annotation, right? And for NinjaTrader, this tells you how many bars back are you looking, right? So 0 is the current bar, 1 is 1 bar back. So we're going to set the displacement to 1, right? Now if the displacement is set to 0, that means we're looking at the current EMA price, that's going to be bouncing up and down as the bar, is forming, right? So as the market price is forming this bar and bouncing up and down, right? The EMA is also bouncing up and down, right? But remember, we want to compare the previous bar's close also to its EMA value, right? So that's going to be, right, 1 bar back. So that means, right, so with displacements, we can see it starts at 0. And so we're going to increment that 1. So the displacement is 1, right? However, when you're looking at bar prices, it uses a look back period, and so we need to increment that to 2. Right, so there you go. That's why I used a number 2 and used a number 1. So there is rule number 1 right there. All right, yeah. So rule number 2 is obviously it needs to be an up bar, and we need to make sure that it closed at or near the top. All right, so let's move this back. So to make sure that it's an up bar or an up candle, that's pretty straightforward. We're just going to grab a bar direction solver, plug that in there. There we go. Right, and again, we want the bar direction for the bar that closed. Remember, we're not looking at, well, not yet. Rule number 2 is not looking at the bar that's forming. It's looking at the bar that's closed, right? So, yeah, you got to love how, there's all these different terminologies, within NinjaTrader on how you look back. So with the bar direction, it uses a term called start bars ago, right? And we're going to use a start bars ago 1, right? So in other words, it's looking back 1 bar. So, and we can see here, see this down bar right here, right? But we have a short output on this up bar, right? That's because it took the short output from this down bar, shifted it forward 1 bar onto the next one. And so we're doing the same thing. We're taking this up bar and shifting that output for this up bar, shifting it forward onto the next bar, right where the signal is going to occur. So I'll give this a bracket 1 as well, right? So we're looking at the bar direction 1 bar back. So we just use the start bars to go for that. So all right, next, so rule number 2 is actually kind of a two-part condition, right? So we just did the candle direction or the bar direction. Now we need to make sure that the close is at the top or within 1 tick. So for that, right, we're comparing. Let's grab a little pointer here. So, right, so we're comparing the close to the high of the bar, right? So we want the close either to equal the high, or the close can be 1 tick away from the high, right? So we can use the comparison solver to do that comparison. So let's grab another comparison solver. And let's give this a name. So again, we're going to compare the close, 1 bar back, or on number 2. And we want to make sure that it is 1 tick away from the high for a long trade, or 1 tick away from the low for a short trade. So input A, again, the input type is price, and for input B, that we're also looking at price as well. So let's set that one to price. So right, input A is the close again. So the close is right the default bar price. So we just need to increment the look back to 2. And now for input B, right, that's where we're comparing the close to either the high for a long signal or the low for a short signal. So for price type long, right, we're comparing the close to the high. And if it's a short signal, right, then we're comparing it to the low price of the bar. And again, the look back period is set to 2. Now, for the output here, this is where in the output, that's where we can add that 1 tick separation between the high and the close. So let's open up the comparison settings here. Click on the little ellipses button there, right? And so this is where we can set up our comparison rules here. So the close can be, let's see, it can be, that needs to be greater than or equal to the high minus 1 tick right? So we take the high price and we can minus 1 tick, right? That's acceptable, right? Remember, if the close is the high minus 1 tick, that's fine. So the close, as long as the close is either equal to the high minus 1 tick or greater than the high minus 1 tick, right? So essentially what we did is we established that price point, right? We took the high and minused 1 tick. So as long as the close equals that price point or is greater than, which would mean the close is equal to the high, then that's the condition we're looking for a long. And then for the short, right, it's just going to be the reverse of all that. So the close less than or equal to the low, and then we're going to add 1 tick there. And remember, it's all written out in plain English there for you, right? So generate a long if the close is greater than or equal to the high minus 1 tick, and then vice versa for the shorts. So all right, let's click OK, and remember, we're looking back 1 bar here, right? We're looking back 1 bar price. So we can see that here, right, we have the close 1 tick away from the high, but there's no long output, right? That long output is shifted on to the next bar, right? And the same here, right? This condition also meets our criteria, but that long output is shifted forward onto the next bar, right? Because remember, we want the signals on the next bar, when price crosses that high in real time, right? So we're looking at, this bar's conditions, and then shifting those conditions onto the bar that actually generates the trade signal, right? So, okay, so now we can actually start connecting things together using a AND node here. All right, so let's connect that in, connect all these up here, and there we go. All right, so we can see, the close is near the high, but it's also underneath the EMA 20. So that's why there's no long output on this bar, right? But this bar, same thing, the close is 1 tick away, but this close is above the EMA, and so we have a long output on the next bar. Right. So basically, these are our setup conditions, right? So those are our setup conditions here. So rule 1 and 2 are basically the setup conditions, and rule number 3 is the actual trade signal trigger, right, which happens on the next bar. So let's do that. And so the trade signal trigger, right, again, we're comparing the close of the bar as the bar is forming, and so when the close gets to this line, right, which is 1 tick above the high, so as soon as that close equals or obviously is greater than this price point, then that is the trade trigger. So we need another comparison solver here. Let's connect that in. So this time we're comparing the close of the current bar. So that's going to be 1, and it needs to be 1 tick above the high or the low of 2. Yeah, there we go, number 2. All right. So, you probably notice that this is very, very similar to this previous solver that we just made, right? Where we're comparing the close of actually one bar back and making sure it's one tick within the high or low, right? But so this one's very similar, just the math is just a little bit different. But this time we're comparing the close, right? The real-time close of the bar that's building here. So let's switch our input types to price, once again. So this time we want the closing price, of the current bar. So the look back period, we're going to leave that at 1. And for input B, for a long signal, right? Remember, price type longs for a long signal. We're going to take the high of the previous bar, right? So this is, so again, right here, right? We're taking the high of the previous bar, and then we want to add 1 tick. And that's what we're comparing against, right? So we're taking the close of the bar that's forming and comparing it to this price here that's being calculated. So that's going to be the high, or input B is going to be the high of the closed bar, 1 bar back, or for a short signal, the low. All right. Now we need to go into the comparison settings here, and this is where we'll kind of do that math. So again, so the close of the current bar's close, right? So remember, this is the close of the bar that's building, and it can be greater than or equal. Actually, let's just do this. We'll just keep it simple here. It can be, as long as it's greater than the high, then our condition's met, right? So obviously, if it's 1 tick above the high, it's greater than the high, right? If the close of this bar, equals the high, then it's not 1 tick above, right? But as soon as the close goes 1 tick above, then it's greater than that high, right? So we don't actually have to put in 1 tick if we don't want to. We can just use greater than, the greater than without the equal. All right, so obviously if you use the equal symbol, then you do have to add that 1 tick offset from the high. But I'll just leave it like that and call it good. So, and also, I guess, just to maybe remove some confusion here, let's change this points to ticks. This actually doesn't do anything because, again, we're not using this input field, but just because this system is all written in terms of 1 tick above this and that, I'll just switch it to ticks, just for good measure. So, all right, even though it doesn't do anything. Okay, so that is that, and now we can just connect that in to there, and that does it. That completes it. So, and so we can see that historically, right, this bar, the close is above, is greater than, 1 tick above the previous bar's close. So obviously, yeah, that closed with a long signal there. But what we're really looking for, we're probably not going to see any signals here unless, let's see here, I'll try something. Yeah, let's try this. And we'll switch to a 1 minute chart. Shoot. Yeah. So we were kind of 1 minute late here. So this previous bar would have generated a signal, when price, ticked up. Here we go. That bar qualifies. So as soon as price goes up 1 tick, and there we go. Boom. Right? Obviously, in real time, if the close is underneath, then there's no signal. But there you go. As soon as it pops up, boom, we can see that signal. And of course, once you plug this BloodHound signal either into Raven or Blackbird, then it's going to execute a signal. So, right. Just, yeah, one thing to remember is that if your indicator, whatever calculate mode your indicator has to run in, your strategy has to run in the same mode. So that's a requirement of NinjaTrader, right? So since your BloodHound signals, the calculate mode is on price change. There we go, right? So we can see here, yeah, right? You notice that little OPC, that stands for on price change. That's telling you the calculate mode. So what I'm getting at is that, if you're going to run this in a strategy to get this, a strategy to execute your entry signals immediately, then your strategy also, so it doesn't matter if you're using Raven or Blackbird. So if I put this into Raven, let's see here. Yeah, let me actually I'll put this into Raven here. We're not going to backtest this. Auto start enabled. And let's see. So the entry order, we're just going to use a market. So yeah, market. Let's see. Yeah, let me just put a profit target in there for good measure. There. And okay, so again, I'm getting a little sidetracked here. So my point is that when you're setting up your strategy, that calculate mode has to be set correctly, right? So obviously strategies will default to on bar close, so we need to switch it to on price change. So, and then the system template. So let's load in today's BloodHound file. Select our entry signals, and yeah, there we go. And oh, I did not enable it. Okay, let me go back into the strategies window. Yeah, always remember with strategies, they are a little different beast, so you do have to enable them separately as a more conscious action, so you don't have strategies running in the background by accident. So, and oh, there we go. So boom. Yeah. So, let's see. Let me close this out. So, oh no, this bar doesn't qualify. The close is at least 2 ticks away, right? Yeah, that bar doesn't qualify. So let's see here. Let's switch to a 30-second chart. There we go. And all right. Hopefully we'll get a close down, and that would set us up for a short trade. Come on, close down. There we go. There we go. All right, cool. So if we get 1 tick down, we'll get a signal. Let's see, is that it? Yeah. There we go. Bingo. Oh, cool. All right, so that does it for this first question there. So Steve is asking, so as a follow-up, wouldn't you need to lock that signal? I don't know. That's up to the trader. As you can see, Raven doesn't need your strategy doesn't need that signal locked in. That's really a personal decision on the trader's part. Because so remember, because your strategy is running with the calculate on price change, right? That is how your strategy is able to see those signals in real time. So yeah, so the strategy doesn't matter to the strategy, but maybe the trader wants to see all the bars historically that might have triggered a signal. So if you wanted to do that, yeah, so before I start editing this, the BloodHound system, you know, because this BloodHound file is open in 2 locations, right? This same BloodHound file is open in BloodHound as an indicator, and it's open in Raven. So I need to shut down Raven to prevent any kind of accident with the BloodHound file, right? So make sure you know, if you're going to edit your BloodHound systems, make sure that that BloodHound file is not open in multiple locations, right? Otherwise, you run the risk of losing your work if that BloodHound file is open in multiple locations. So the easy fix for that is, let's just remove Raven, and there you go. Okay. Yeah. So if you want to see those signals basically locked in, then instead of using, so remember this is the guy that does the signal trigger. So let's see here. There we go. We can kind of give this a little bit of a name here, right? And so instead of using the close price of the bar, right? Obviously, if you use the low or the high, right? The high obviously sticks wherever the high was, you know, as opposed to, let's see, I remember we did have a signal historically. I think it was back here maybe. Yeah, here we go. So, right on this bar here, obviously, when the market ticked up to there, it would have generated a signal, but of course it closed down, so we don't see that historical signal because the close is below that, right? That previous bar's high, right? So, you know, it's just a matter of using different bar prices if you want to see historical signals there. So, for example, I could take this solver, make a copy, paste it down here, and instead of using the close price, I could use the high or the low price, right, of the current bar, right? So remember number 1, and then compare that to the high or the low, right, of 1 bar back. So, and let me get rid of that numbering there. So I could just set this to high and set the short signal to low. Right, if I plug that in, yeah, there we go. So there's our long signal because the high is more than 1 tick above, right, the previous close there. Yeah, you know, so you could just swap in either one, right? You can only use one of these at a time. Do not connect both of them. So you can't use both connected, right? One or the other. So yeah. So there you go. So now we see that historical signal right there. Oh yeah, even on, there's quite a few bars here. Even on this bar, we can see that historical signal. So yeah. All right. So there we go. I'm going to disconnect that, and we'll just leave that right there. Call it good.